Welcome to another episode of Theological Sidebars. How's it going? I'm going to put this out because it's about time to. We need to do a video. It's been good. Um, Man, as I'm sitting here, you're aware of what you look like when you put the light on. Like, all of a sudden, I realize my hair is in different positions and places, and I feel like if I look down, it doesn't look so bad. So, for those of you who are just listening, you've been spared. But for those of you watching, there's not enough anything that could fix this except to shave it all off. So, hopefully, by the next video, this thing is gone and it looks good again. I always like looking at videos of short, grows long. But it's time. It's time to cut the hair. All right, this has nothing to do with what we're going to go with today, but I want to deal with this because this is kind of an interesting topic. Talking about temptation. And, over the last couple of weeks, there seems to be a little bit of controversy. It probably nothing mainstream, but at least in some theological circles, some controversy about temptation and the role, I guess, how it connects to sin. So I want to look at James, where we've been, as we've been going through our series in James verse by verse on Sunday, and look at what it says. In James chapter 1:13, he says, no one undergoing a trial should say, I'm being tempted by God, since God is not tempted by evil, and he himself doesn't tempt anyone. So really, that's all he's saying is God doesn't tempt people. He does test people. That's the whole point so far. He's allowing you to go through the trials, but he's not dangling sin in front of you to tempt you towards evil. But he goes on in verse 14, he says, but each person is tempted when he's drawn away and enticed by his own evil desire. Then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is fully grown, it gives birth to death. So here's the question, right? Is temptation sin? Now think about that for just a second. Is temptation sin? Now here, we know that Jesus was tempted. And so it was not a sin for Jesus to be tempted in the wilderness. So that's our first clue. So James, though, notice what he says, that here's the deal, right? That each person is tempted and when he's drawn away and enticed by his own evil desires. So here's what's key is, now he will talk about Satan later on, but he doesn't make us, the devil's going to be the one to do it. What he reveals is something that's important for us to maintain, which is within each person, within each believer, are evil desires. Look at what Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11. He says, dear friends, I urge you, as strangers and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires that wage war against the soul. Conduct yourselves honorably among the Gentiles when they slander you as evildoers. So that's important, right? Is that Peter tells us that within each individual are evil desires that wage war against the soul. And so that's something I think all of us should maintain, is recognize, as James says it, that the way that we really get into trouble is we have these evil desires that are within us. And you and I are enticed by evil desires that are already there because of the fall. In fact, one of the things I think it's important to look at, and I really highly advocate, if you've never had time to go back and look at the 1689 Baptist Catechism, do it. Because it's good stuff. Despite where you fall on the spectrum of whether you're Reformed or not, I mean, this is historical. This is stuff from the Baptists that put out, in the 1600s. So I think it's interesting to look at what they said. But I do think that it's one of the things he says, what it says as it talks about what happened to man in the fall, is it says this. It says, with the question 21 saying, wherein consists the sinfulness of the estate that whereinto man fell? Meaning, like, so what happened to man after he fell, right? And it says this, the sinfulness of the estate whereinto man fell consists of the guilt of Adam's first sin, the want of original righteousness, the corruption of his whole nature, which is commonly called original sin, together with all actual transgressions which proceed from it. So it affirms, and so it's something that we should affirm, right? That within us, because of the fall, we have within us a totally corrupted nature. All right. And so we should be mindful of. I think the other thing that we need to be mindful of. So not only do we have a corrupted nature, remember, James tells us early on, and I'll go back to the passage to show you. I think we should keep this in mind, is that as people are being enticed away towards sin, recognize, he says right here, that you are going to experience various trials. Now, like I said, that word can be trial or temptation. That's something to keep in mind. But I think that sometimes in the trial that you have, you're going to have, one of your trials might be that you're dealing with different temptations. And so in the Christian life, we're not all dealing with the same we're not dealing with the same, they're definitely not Christian. We're not dealing with the same evil desires, right? We're dealing with desires that wage war against the soul, is what Peter says. And I would say that all of us, as a result of the fall, are dealing with different things that come against us. And so you might look at your own life and recognize, maybe you've seen in your own life that you've been maybe more inclined towards certain sins than others. Maybe you find yourself more willing to give up on certain things, or give in to certain things, different, or against what the scriptures teach. It just comes, it's such a draw to you. And then you might find others, and you think, they're morons. How come they can't do that? And I think that's part of it, is because all of us are drawn towards different things. And it does seem that there's a few things that we're typically all drawn towards. But you should be mindful of what are those things that are waging war against you. Obviously, there's going to be lots of temptations. But I would say that comes with a lot of people. Like, greed might be a huge thing for you, right? And so come tax season, right? If you want to get the max amount out, if you could just put that number right there, right? Who's going to really know? And then it'll mean more for you. And that probably is a huge, huge draw. But you gotta stop and recognize, like, no, I can't do that. I shouldn't do that. It's, even though nobody ever knows, right? But that money, you shouldn't do those things, right? For me, maybe it's immorality. Maybe it's something to have to do with sexual stuff. And that draw is hard on you. And see, here's the debate that's happening right now in some Christian circles. The question is, though, when those desires pop up, when you're driving down the road, or when something like that pops into you're having a conversation with someone, and all of a sudden, these things come in. Whatever that is, like I said, I think there's a whole spectrum of what those evil desires are, what you feel pulled towards. The question that is being brought up right now in some circles is, when that desire comes, is that a desire in which I need to repent of? Now, I'd like to wade into this just for a second, right? Here's what I think. Notice in this, each person is tempted when he's drawn away and enticed by his own evil desire. And after that desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is fully grown, it gives birth to death. It does seem to make a difference, right? That you can stop before it's too late, right? That's why we're told to make, in 1 Peter, right? We're told to abstain from sinful desires, right? Those are things that you and I should, I think what was being taught here is that when that happens, you and I have a choice. We can either entertain those desires and then begin to let it marinate and let it change us and begin to seep into our hearts, or we can kill it right then and there. And I think a good way to look at that is the way Jesus deals with it, right? He says, you've heard it said, do not commit adultery, but I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart. Now, I don't think Jesus is talking about, boom, the first thought that pops in. I think he's talking about the idea that you have, that you're looking at that person, that's this. Notice in this, if you just look, I've got the easy stuff here with my Bible software, but it's this present active, situation. It's ongoing looking. It's not just, it just happens, but you now have gone from looking to now it's beginning to think about it and to put it into your heart. Now, notice what Jesus says to do with it, though. If you know that that's the case, pluck out your right eye, right? If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. If it's better for you to lose one of the parts of your body, for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it's better to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. So I think one of the things that we should affirm from this is you have a choice. Those things can quickly become sin. Those temptations, those evil desires that are trying to tempt you, those can quickly become sin. But how you deal with them, right? How you deal with those things, that is the big issue, right? There's a fine line to where it is sin, or it can be, it's gone and it's done. But I will say this, here's what I think every Christian should do. When you have that stuff pop up, you should confess that back to God. You should recognize that that is still evidence of that corrupted nature that's in you. You need forgiveness for who you just are as a result of the fall, that you are a fallen creature. But I don't think you should beat yourself up in that you've had that desire. If you've not given in and you've tried to kill it like Jesus tells us to do, then you have not sinned in that. Still, it is evidence of your sinful nature. And I think that's part of where we need to get into. That's kind of the controversy, right? Is, do I need to repent of even that desire? And some will say, yeah, you need to repent of that desire. And others would say, no. And I'm leaning more towards, right, that you don't need to repent specifically because you had that pop in, but I think you should still give that back up to the Lord and say, God, this is evidence. This is something I don't want in my life. These are things I want, and maybe you're going to be fighting that battle towards that temptation, towards that sin, but God doesn't want you to live in that. He wants you to take care of it before you do. Funny enough, people actually took Jesus' words here literally. If you ever study church history, there are some people that actually did take matters into their own hands and get a little literal. It is interesting that specifically one guy in particular who did this, if any of you listen our church history, you could put down the right answer, and I'll see if you're correct. You probably will be, but he became the father of allegory. I wonder if that was as a result of being a little too literal with this one. But you take sin seriously, take those evil desires seriously, and I do think that all of us should be mindful. What do we do to make sure that when that desire comes, I've set up to where I'm not going to go with this. I'm not going to entertain it. I'm not going to spend my time looking into it and thinking about it more. So how do we kill it? All right, that's all I got right now, and look for some more stuff. We should be having a good OTXNT drop this week. We did one last week. I forgot to record it on my computer. So Andrew, Dr. Marquez, has it, and I'm waiting for when he will give it to me. And then we'll probably have another one this week too. So you might get bonus, triple content from yours truly. Okay, that's super exciting. I could just spread it all out. I don't know. Anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Like, that helps when you push the little like button. And comment if you want to. Let's talk later. Bye-bye.